Welcome, everyone. I'd like to welcome people to this event, which is co-sponsored by the Catholic Chaplaincy to London Universities, the University Jewish Chaplaincy, and the Anscombe Bioethics Centre, which is the National Bioethics Centre for the Catholic Church in the United Kingdom and Ireland. My name is Professor David Albert Jones, and I am the director of the Anscombe Centre. So that's my role here. The title we've given this event is Assisted Dying, Eugenics, Euthanasia and Medicine. It's an event for Interfaith Week, which is a week, Interfaith Week in universities, but it's not just a faith issue, it affects everyone. However, the abuses of eugenics have had an impact on religious minorities in the past, most especially through the horrors of Nazi medicine. And our hope in making this topic an interfaith discussion is that it can help illuminate the debate over assisted dying in a way that contributes to the common good of society, for those of all faiths and none. This topic looks back and forward, back to the past and forward to the future, because to look to the future, it is necessary to acknowledge our past. And historically, there has been an important link between what has come to be called assisted dying, that is euthanasia and assisted suicide, and the idea of eugenics, that is the idea of improving the health of the population by preventing diseases that are genetically inherited. It's not so much that allowing euthanasia necessarily leads people to be regarded as less worthy of life. Historically speaking, it's rather the other way around. It was first the eugenics movement, which began what G.K. Chesterton called a war upon the weak, the characterizing of people who were sick as a burden to society and as unworthy to breed. And it was then these same people who first embraced eugenics, who then took the further step and argued that the law should permit euthanasia for the same people, at least voluntary euthanasia. Eugenics came first, historically. Euthanasia followed. The worst excesses were in Nazi Germany, but the same ideas were popular among some doctors and academics and politicians in England and in the United States in the 1920s and 30s. For example, the founder of the organization, which is now called Dignity in Dying, but for most of its history was known as the Voluntary Euthanasia Society, was a doctor called Charles Killick Millard. He was also a prominent member of the Eugenics Society. Eugenics led to euthanasia. It might be thought that Killick Millard, mainly writing in the 1920s and 30s before the war, was simply naive, and that it would be grossly unfair to associate him with the terrible things done under Nazi eugenics and euthanasia. However, even after the war, even after the Nuremberg trials, when no one could anymore claim ignorance of these atrocities, Killick Millard was contacted by a man called Siegbert Ramsauer, a Nazi war criminal who had been a mid-ranking officer in the SS and a doctor in a concentration camp. Ramsauer was suspected of many crimes, including the use of prisoners for human experimentation, but he was convicted on 2 counts of euthanizing prisoners by injecting them with phenol. Ramsauer was an Austrian, and knowing that Killick Millard was head of the Voluntary Euthanasia Society in Britain, he wrote to him asking him to advocate for Ramsauer's early release, ostensibly on health grounds. Incredibly to me anyway, from this distance in history, Killick Millard was more than happy to do this. And he wrote to the British government on Ramsauer's behalf. For after all that he had been found guilty of were 2 counts of euthanasia, albeit involuntary, albeit of prisoners, albeit in a concentration camp. That was the 1950s, and it is part of our history. But it is still relevant to the present because discussion of assisted dying always takes place in the context of the increasing numbers of people living to a great old age and the challenge of providing adequate health and social care. In the foreground, it is all about autonomy. But in the background, the idea of being a burden is more and more prominent. Most people who die by assisted suicide in Oregon cite fear of becoming a burden as one of their reasons for ending their life.